Let's return to the Vampiverse, where Lilith, the black and white sci-fi adventurer from an alternate Earth, takes on her first assignment as a full member of the Reality Corps. Let's talk about it in our review of Vampirella Dark Reflections #1 from Dynamite Comics. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Vampirella Dark Reflections #1 from Dynamite. The story starts off with a catch-up with Lilith, who is a character from last year's Vampiverse miniseries. She's a version of Vampirella from a black and white universe that is sort of a retro sci-fi pulp serial type of universe. She's very enthusiastic, very wide-eyed, and very much full of energy, and she's super excited to be a member of the Reality Corps. We catch up with Lilith as she interrupts a ceremony in progress from the Cult of Chaos as they're trying to bring forth the Chaos Lords on one of the threat Earths. Suddenly, she bursts through a portal, breaks up the ceremony, and now the Chaos Lords are put back in their place, and the cult has been arrested and or disbanded. Later, we catch up with Lilith when she returns to the Needle. It's this sort of strange, long, thin, sharp-looking object in the middle of the Weave, which is the name for the nexus of the multiverses and the realities in Vampirella's world. She learned that this mission to break up the Cult of Chaos has earned her a place as a full-fledged member of the Reality Corps, and they are ready to give her her first mission. An alternate Earth with an alternate Vampirella has gone radio silent. They can't get in contact with them. And it's on thread 9285. And her first mission is to go investigate and find out what's going on. Before Lilith can leave for her mission, she has to do one important thing. She has to get her new ship, which she has earned because now she's a member of the Reality Corps. She heads down to the hangar bay where she meets Pendragon, who is the lead scientist for the Reality Corps, and she's given the opportunity to bond with her new ship, which has a personality of its own. She's giddy with the excitement of, I get my own ship, I can do my own thing, I can fly around the multiverse and do all these crazy, exciting adventures, although she's a little bit unsettled because Pendragon has given the ship the personality of Lilith's dead little brother by the name of Adam. So now she's sort of reunited with her brother, but in a weird, strange, sci-fi sort of way. Lilith and Adam head to thread 9285, and she's sort of put off by the name Adam because it's just too close to her brother, so she nicknames the ship Brat. As they approach thread 9285, they find it's sort of blocked or at least impeded by some sort of supernatural energy resistance. They break through the resistance, land on the Earth, or at least enter the atmosphere of the Earth from 9285, and they find it's pretty much decimated all the way around. All the buildings are ruined and are covered with this weird silky web-like substance. Suddenly the ship is attacked by these gigantic demonic moth-like creatures, and in the battle, Brat forces Lilith to eject so he can lead the swarm off and away from her to protect her from harm. As she's falling, Lilith ejects her wings and she sort of flies down, but she's also attacked by another moth that stayed behind to look for any stragglers. They fight, Lilith kills the moth, but in the battle one of her wings is damaged, and they land in a very violent manner in the middle of a sort of dome-covered sports stadium. When Lilith gets back up, the moth creature is dead, and she sees a crowd of women standing around. They're all pregnant. Their bellies are exposed, and their bellies have these weird symbols on them that Lilith thinks looks familiar. And then things get really worse when more visitors show up who are absolutely not a fan of visitors from other dimensions. And that's how we end the issue. Let's switch over to the technical aspects, starting with the character development. Snigoski and Atchison give Lilith something much bigger to challenge her cheery, wide-eyed optimism. It's a big test. It's a dangerous test. And what's interesting is that now Lilith, who comes from a very sci-fi pulp serial kind of universe, is taking on a challenge that feels much more like what Vampirella would normally encounter on her Earth, the prime Vampirella, with big supernatural threats that are trying to take over the world. It's all very supernatural. It's very big monsters. It's all kinds of scary stuff. So now you have this mix of genres that come together, and Lilith is right in the middle of that. So she's now being challenged to not be so optimistic, to not be so cheery and exuberant, and all the things that are sort of part of her character, which is good. You want her to be challenged, and the writers are putting her through her paces. Let's switch over to the art. So Daniel Main is the artist on this issue, and it's an interesting but a seamless mix between science fiction and the supernatural dangers that you normally expect out of a Vampirella comic. The character designs look good. The wide panels are, I think, what sell this, because you get some of the backgrounds and the settings with sweeping shots, interesting angles, and the backgrounds are really, I would say, done pretty well. So that the comic feels very complete and very dense with visual material, which is a good thing. And then on top of that, you get the spaceships that are traveling through the weave, which is this sort of interdimensional nexus between the different thread Earths, and it looks really good, surprisingly good, and probably better than what we've seen in most comics that are exploring multiverse type of travel and adventures. That said, if you were going to pick on anything, the polish on some of the inks could be cleaner, could be a little bit smoother, but overall it's a good visual presentation. Let's move over to pacing and structure. So pacing is good. It reads lickety split. You get exactly what you need from the setup to understand who Lilith is, what the reality core is, what is the nature of her mission, and where she's supposed to go with that. So it hits you right in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you know exactly what's going on. So pacing is good. It doesn't get bogged down with complications. And it's, again, an interesting mix of sort of classic sci-fi pulp adventure type of scenario, and then bringing in a very unique to Vampirella stories, supernatural horror element that's rooted in demonic and sort of dark eldritch powers. If you're a new reader, you don't need to know anything about the Vampiverse to kind of get acclimated to what's going on here, which is good. And the writers are leaning very heavily into the show don't tell kind of method of developing Lilith as a character and establishing the setup. So the art and the script are working pretty well together here. That said, if we're going to look at something that I think got shortchanged a little bit, the establishment of the reality core and the missions and how it all comes in play didn't get really much of any setup in the original Vampiverse series from last year. So you're sort of jumping right in. It would have helped to have a little bit more world building to see what is the reality core's mission, what is their hierarchy, how do they come up with stuff. So you get it, or at least you get the broad brush strokes, but it feels like you're sort of jumping into the middle world without a lot of grounding, and just a little bit more world building would have helped. So let's talk about the themes. Along with that very clean setup for the plot and the structure, the basic thematic element is not anything deeper than it needs to be, which is very simply good versus evil. Lilith isn't wrestling with any kind of internal conflicts or being forced to examine traumas from her past. It's a straight adventure story. She's the good guy. She's going up against bad guys, and she has to overcome an overwhelming challenge. It's as simple as it gets, and honestly, in this case, that's all you really need, which is fine. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. If the setup of the story, the nexus, the needle, the weave, thread, earths, all that stuff sounds very familiar, is because a lot of that sounds or parallels, or at least echoes, what's going on over Project Superpowers, which is Dynamite's other series of multiversal adventures, which is using public domain characters to set them up in a scenario where they're a multi-dimensional force that investigates Earths and their different problems from across the multiverse. And what makes it a little bit more complicated is because Vampirella has also appeared in that other series, and she's at least an auxiliary member of the project, and she's helped them out on different adventures. This feels very much the same, but it appears to be very different. So the weave, or I should say the reality core and the project, are completely separate from each other and don't interact, and they're not part of the same multiverse, if that makes sense. But the way they're structured feels, I won't say identical, but pretty close. Final thoughts. What do we think about Vampirella Dark Reflections #1? It's a rousing kind of sci-fi space adventure where you're following Lilith, who's this wide-eyed new recruit to the reality core. So there's a lot of fun there, a lot of excitement, and this feeling of newness that really brings you along. The script distills a complex multiversal constructs and shenanigans and all the setup pretty clearly, easy to follow, and it gives you a very classic good versus evil story. And then on top of that, Daniel Main's art is very good, and especially in the trippier aspects of what it's like to travel through the weave and all the sort of imaginative ideas of what it's like to traverse the multiverse. Therefore, we're going to give Vampirella Dark Reflections #1 from Dynamite Comics an 8.5 out of 10. Leave us a thumbs up if you read Vampiverse from last year and you liked it, as we did. And if you don't like multiversal stories, and especially from the big two like Marvel and DC, if you think it gets overplayed, leave us a comment and let us know your thoughts about that and how they should be doing things if the multiverse concept is just played out. Thank you very much for joining. Please stay tuned through the outro for the next review.